know, it's becoming quite popular to hear of U.S. visas being revoked or travel bans being issued. Just a few days ago, the U.S. imposed the entry block and other sanctions on 6 men and their immediate families. Brows have been raised over the situation, and so we've invited attorney at law Oliver J. Langstadt to share with us. Good morning, Oliver. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. It's morning time.
Good morning.
First of all, it really came as a surprise to us, Oliver, given, I think, even the number of years that would have passed since the specific incident that the U.S. is citing. But really, as Jamaican citizens, how much, it's kind of rhetorical, how much power do they have over us? I guess it's their country. They can say we can't go at any time. But is there not an expectation of some kind of reasonable judgment that we're hoping will happen in cases like this?
Well, I think it would be fair to say that the current administration does things that mystify, I think, the world. So, to tell you the truth, as I received the news and many other people, it was more than a surprise, because if you assume that whatever incident they are referring to happened, I believe I think it's 17 years ago, and the court action was some 15 years ago. It seems very, very curious, to say the least, that so many years on, all of a sudden now the administration would take a position and use the law in the way they did. There is a law, the Magnitsky Act, that does provide for the US government to take certain actions against individuals who are involved in human rights abuses and corruption. But I really am at a loss to tell you why the administration decided at this time to take this action. I have tried to work it out, and sorry to tell you, but it has beaten me so far.
Yeah, just before Simon comes in, because one of the things I'm thinking is, yes, it's a reflection on the individuals that have been banned, but isn't it also an indictment on our justice system that our justice system would have said not guilty, but it seems almost as if the U.S. is saying, well, we think you are.
I think the fundamental problem is that the United States and Jamaica have had a very complicated relationship through the decades and through the time that Jamaica has become independent. I think if you go back to the 70s, we know that historically there were certain activities undertaken by the administration at that time regarding destabilization of an existing Jamaican government, at that time the Michael Manley administration. So I would agree with you that it seems that the US is not respecting Jamaican due process and law, because, as you rightly point out, those individuals who were allegedly involved in certain activities had their day in court, and my understanding is they were found not guilty and freed. It wasn't a matter that the case didn't go forward. So in accordance with Jamaican constitutional law and due process, they had their day in court. Why the US chooses so many years on not to recognize that and to now issue this travel ban is at best questionable, and at worst I think it's really not in good faith.
Interesting. And so how does this work moving forward now, Sir Langstadt? This administration has put this ban into effect. Is it something that could be revisited by the next administration? Is it likely something that can be reversed, or is a ban forever?
No, the way the law is structured is that there's a provision in the law that the president can terminate the application of sanctions if the president determines that there were certain actions taken, whether the individual or individuals will no longer be involved in that activity, or whether there has been, quote, for want of another term, redemption. So the president can revoke it at any time through law and through executive order that has been implemented. So it's not a permanent ban, and in fact it gets reviewed periodically.
Okay.
My next question is the extension of that ban to immediate family members. So it's one thing to say we have a problem with the way you conduct yourself as it relates to human rights. But why immediate family members? What are they hoping to achieve by something like that?
Well, let me tell you again, I cannot fathom the thinking of the administration, but the concept behind it is the law is that if you assume that individuals were involved in some nefarious acts, such as human rights abuses or corruption, they may have received support from family or relatives, and therefore that would be the theory behind it. I think it is weak at best, but where I see it's possibly applicable is where you have the corruption and maybe allegedly some family members benefited from the monetary gains that were ill-gotten. However, in this particular incident, my understanding is that it is simply a matter of alleged behavior that was improper, and therefore it does seem harsh and improper. I think the key here is what really was communicated to the Jamaican government and what really is the message behind this. There is a message behind it. Governments do things from time to time and then there's a message behind it. But I really cannot tell you, considering the timeline and the close relationship that Jamaica enjoys with the United States, why this was done at this time.
So you mentioned governments. According to retired Senior Superintendent of Police, Renata Adams, he says one of their citizens, meaning Jamaica citizens, has been wronged by a foreign government or a foreign country, and we are a sovereign nation. So it is incumbent on them, the Jamaican government, to make a statement and to investigate this thing and deal with it, but I'm not inviting them to do it. Is this something that our government would get involved in to try and look at either repealing or appealing on behalf of a Jamaican citizen?
I would definitely think so. I would think that there must be some high-level discussions that have occurred, and I wouldn't even be surprised if the current U.S. administration might have even signaled in the past prior to the actual announcement that they were doing something. But I think the point is well taken that the government of Jamaica should take up with the United States this issue, and especially pertaining to an individual such as a relative, why the relative is being sanctioned for alleged activity by a relative, which, by the way, that relative had their day in court, went through Jamaican constitutional due process, was found not guilty. So yes, I think it should be taken up. Of course, the problem is that the relationship between the United States and Jamaica is not a balanced one, because Jamaica is the small person in the relationship, sorry to say, and the US is the quote, big man. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, unfortunately, historically, the US has sometimes used that big man status and been heavy-handed. And because we really don't know, it presents itself as the US being very heavy-handed here, considering all the facts and the timeline.
Yeah, you're an immigration attorney, Oliver. I think most people in Jamaica, when they think about immigration attorneys, they think about actually being filed for or migrating. In a situation like this, could a family member say, well, if the government doesn't intervene, I'm going to get an immigration attorney and see if they can intervene on my behalf? Is that possible?
It is possible, and you certainly would have the right to consult with counsel, and counsel could reach out to the US government. In this particular circumstance, assuming similar facts, this is more a political than legal issue. Legally, the US has the right to do what they did, but whether they should have done it, I again think is questionable. So in an approach to the US government, you'd have to really try to get into the political arena as well as the legal arena. But yes, the answer is yes, it can be done, and it has been done. And there have been individuals, historically, it's interesting, the US has actually admitted non-immigrants or those who are not citizens or green card holders a very questionable character. In fact, living in South Florida today are a couple of characters of very questionable reputation who were alleged to have done some very serious things in their home countries. And it has always been, quote, a mystery how they have not only gained entry, but they have remained here living in the open when the facts and allegations and actions against them are much more serious than what has been discussed and what has occurred with the Jamaican individuals. And in fact, those individuals living in South Florida have never even had their due process. They either fled their jurisdictions or they just came into the US. Again, with Jamaica, the individuals in question faced the courts of law of Jamaica, had their day in court, and they were found not guilty. So the whole thing is curious, and I think the administration, the current Jamaican government, needs to make a determined good faith effort to get to the bottom of this.
Oh, thank you so much for your insight this morning, Mr. Langstad. Good to have you. Thank you for your time. Attorney at Law, Oliver J. Langstad. Some very interesting insight into this case. We will see certainly what happens next as things develop. Coming up next, we talk reciprocity in relationships. We'll be right back with that.